Yeah, welcome everybody. Welcome to today's webinar in the case Microdrink Revolution, Digital Tech, Innovation and Branding. I'm very delighted to spend an hour today with you and with Martin Murray, the CEO and founder of Waterdrop. Before I dive into the case and before I introduce Martin to you, we will spend quite some time together. And today, let me quickly announce the agenda here. So I will give a quick introduction, a quick overview of the case itself, while we were writing this case and how do I use this case in the classroom. And then, we will spend most of the time today discussing with Martin the story of Waterdrop, the journey of Waterdrop, the initial idea when he developed the product, the company in 2015, how he was building the core product, and then moving into what's going on today, how he's extending the company into various regions, but not only regional extension, also vertical extension, where he's building new powerful solutions using various technologies and of course lots of data. And then finally we want to close, and that's again also good to see here in my list. We have lots of participants, founders, right? On the one hand, entrepreneurs, but we also have lots of participants today which work in a corporate. And whenever I teach this case in my executive classes with organizations, it's always great to see how much executives tell me they learn from how Martin is running the organization. So that would be the last point here, Waterdrop, the organization itself, how it's being run. And of course, then we close with the Q&A. So let me start with a little poll here. First question to you. Very simple. Do you know Waterdrop? The options are: I've never heard of it, then I have heard of it, but I have not tried it. I've tried Waterdrop, but will not use it again. Or maybe you are a loyal customer. So let me give you a second here, a minute, to answer this poll. See the results. Yeah, it's so. Almost 60% have never heard of Waterdrop before. 37% have not tried it. They are aware of it. So Martin, maybe there's lots of work to do. We have only 1% said they are loyal customers, a few percent that have at least tried it. So very interesting. But again, today it's as we know with all these cases, it's not about Waterdrop itself, right? I would again argue, otherwise we wouldn't have written the case at INSEAD. It's a fantastic story to teach various concepts. So it's also really more about what you can learn from a case like this, because what this really one of the main objectives with these in the case webinars, that we bring the experience from a classroom discussion into a webinar like today. But let me give you a little overview of Waterdrop, but really here just 5 minutes that you get a better understanding, because 60% have never heard about the company. Martin founded, and he will talk about it, of course, in more detail in a minute here. Martin founded the company in 2015. He realized at one point there is a gap between what the industry is offering and what consumers are actually demanding, right? So on the one hand, as you can see here, carbonated soft drinks full of sugar, full of conservation chemicals, lots of plastic, lots of CO2, massive supply chain, right? But on the other hand, customers, they really expect healthy drinks, sustainability, customization, and convenience. And that's really the initial idea, where it was coming from, to change this, how beverages are being sold. And again, it's not just adding another beverage here, it's really changing how the industry is creating solutions. And that's also, again, what I really like about this case, because at the end, Martin thought about water as a platform, right? When I remember the initial discussions we had when we said, okay, maybe let's write a case about it. How can an organization, a founder, an entrepreneur, if you will, build an organization with limited resources? Initially, it was like, okay, are we just offering another beverage? But no, here, as you can see, for Martin, it was never really about Waterdrop itself. It's about drinking more water. So really water as a platform. And that was also for me, if you will, this one element, which also really convinced me in believing in this solution. And yeah, how it works, as you can see here on this slide, they are extracting the ingredients from plants. They are compressing it into a cube, and then they are wrapping it. And yeah, you can flavor your water, warm or cold. We will talk about the various products in a minute, and Martin will elaborate further why some of these ideas were launched and others maybe not. But that's really the idea. And yeah, in my classes, some people say, yeah, but what's really so exciting about it, right? Why should I buy it? And again, lots of these questions we will address later. I mean, today the numbers, they speak a little bit for itself. Again, the product, I can't remember exactly when it was launched, the idea 2015, but the first product, if I'm not mistaken, was not before 2018. So we will talk about this, but you will see almost 2 million happy customers, 1.5 million social media fans, 200 million water drops produced to date. We will show later almost over 120 million in revenues. The team is now 230 people big. And again, this was all happening over the last 3 to 4 years, if you will. And here, just to give you a quick overview of the products. So initially started with the products you see on the left, the Microdrinks, but then at a later stage, micro energy was added. Now you can have micro tea, if you will, and micro lights, which were just launched or in the planning, if you will be launched soon. And today, and that's where we will also have a discussion, because a couple of questions some of you already sent before, is the go-to-market strategy, right? So while initially the idea was really around DTC, selling mostly directly to consumers, now Martin is thinking, like many other digital natives, if you will, how can I come up with a better multi-channel approach where I'm also integrating offline channels. And really, yeah, here you see on this slide, by today already 24 stores or kiosks in 6 countries, and Martin is adding more and more to the mix. But then really exciting for me also, that's why I need to write a B case on it, and Martin and I are planning on this already, because as you can see here today, it's also about vertical extension, where Martin is moving away from the core product into, yeah, like this, if you will, hydration ecosystem, right? So Lucy, the smart cap that you can see here, was added this year. It's really hot off the press, if you will. I think Martin will touch on it. End of June, it will be fully launched. But you see the company again, all around the positioning, drink more water, helping people to hydrate, leveraging tech and data for doing so. And really, if you will, create a new value proposition, a new business model. And that's really the high level overview I wanted to give you about the company. But also here, just one last thing to add about my research, because now when I'm teaching the case, And many of my students or in my programs, whether you in a degree program or in an executive program, you might remember this, the 3 transformational shifts that I'm researching and I was focusing on in particular over the last 2 years, which are the digital selling shift, the digital experience makeover, and the digital proposition pivot, which I'm describing usually as digital selling. It's about selling more. It's effective engagement, if you will. How do I engage more effectively with my customers to sell more of my products or solution? And here it's really about clarifying the target, capturing attention, cultivating interest, and converting to action. But you're not necessarily changing the product, right? So it's really about engagement. The second shift, the digital experience makeover, that's where it's all about enriching and innovating the customer experiences. So understanding the pain points, understanding at which stage in the journey can I use what kind of technology, what kind of data to really enrich the experience, right? While the first shift is really about engagement, communication, if you will, the second shift is about changing the experience. And then the last one, the digital proposition pivot. So this one is really about selling new, right? Developing a new customer-centric, data-driven value proposition. And now, again, I'm using this case to teach around these 3 shifts because I think Martin, and again, going back to, in particular, this ecosystem that he's building around hydration, fits nicely also to the 3rd shift. So all these 3 shifts, I would argue, Waterdrop is mastering fairly well. And that's how I use the case in today's sessions. Before we open it up and before I introduce Martin, maybe linked to these 3 shifts, another quick poll question for you. If you think about your organization and if you think about your company, what's the most pressing shift for you? Is it the digital selling shift, really about engaging with customers? Or is it the experience makeover? So how do you create better experiences? Or do you think, hey, we are acting on a legacy business model. How do we enrich our business model by leveraging data and tech? So let me give you a few seconds here as well. And then I will introduce Martin and we dive into the questions that you have and I have for him. While you can only pick one, I know many organizations face multiple problems. Yeah, but great. I mean, it's a good mix. 33% shift number 1, 25% the experience makeover, and over 40% the digital proposition pivot. So it's a little bit the last one. How do I pivot to a new business model? So we will dive into this. Yeah, but let's dive into it. So let me introduce Martin. So Martin, first of all, welcome again. Thanks for joining us today. Thanks for talking about Waterdrop and the journey. Good to see you out of Vienna. Martin was at INSEAD in 2015. He did his MBA in 2015 before he spent some time at BCG as a management consultant. And then during INSEAD, he founded Waterdrop. I don't know, Martin, let me maybe start with the first question here right away. Was it your aim coming to INSEAD and you said, I need to create my own company, or were you planning going back to BCG? So first of all, welcome again, and then you can answer the question.
Well, thank you very much, Joerg. And welcome everybody to the session. Maybe to answer your question, to be very honest, it was always my plan not to go back. I saw the MBA as a chance not only to be inspired, but work on this high-level idea I had. So I hoped to work up the courage to actually leave BCG after the MBA, and that is exactly what I did.
Yeah, and can you talk a little bit more about the idea? Again, we have lots of entrepreneurs in the room, lots of people that want to maybe create their own company. And I mean, here it's very interesting. I mean, you picked this traditional industry, right? I mean, in my class at INSEAD, we see lots of tech startups, and you picked a very, well, I wouldn't say boring industry, but traditional industry. So can you talk a little bit about the initial idea?
No, I mean, my insight was not so sophisticated, right? The insight is quite obvious. The insight is the beverage industry is interesting because it's so enormous, right? We're speaking about 700 billion in market value. But if you look at it in more detail, you discover that it hasn't really changed for decades. Like the business model is a supply chain model where you put sugar water into plastic bottles and ship it around the world with different marketing strategies. And I actually got quite excited about it because I could hear all these smart people talking about big data and flying to Mars and not crypto back then, but other things. And I was thought, why doesn't anybody do something about this industry? Because for me, there was two obvious problems. One is I just find the beverage industry incredibly unsustainable, right? You have all these plastic bottles, you have all the CO2 connected to shipping that heavy product around. That's one. And the second is there's virtually no data. I mean, some beverage guys may disagree, but if you're not selling direct to consumer, you virtually have no clue about your customers. So you don't really know what customers like, what they don't. You can't really track any cohorts. You can't do any of the sophisticated stuff you can do with ecom because beverages are too heavy. You can't really ship them online. It's unsustainable. It's uneconomical. And people don't buy 27 cans of whatever online. They go to the local supermarket to do so. And then I think you touched upon it before. I just felt not only rationally, as I described, but also emotionally that somebody had to at least try to do something. You know, you're up against giants in that industry. And my very naive idea was to say, let's use water as a platform. I believe in a world where people have access to clean drinking water. That should be preferably tap water or filtered tap water. And there's no more need to bottle anything. And then I experimented for quite a bit at INSEAD, did all the branding courses with you also, but also did a lot of research, and then kind of saw that there is an opportunity and nothing really existed to match that demand that I at least saw. And because Waterdrop in many ways was an iPad invention, right? Nobody asked for the product. I just had to invent it and work 2 years of R&D to then launch it. So very little data to go from it. And that's what I did. So that was my insight. And I just knew Waterdrop needs to exist. It made a lot of sense to me. And then since quitting or since stopping INSEAD, I've been doing nothing but thinking about this idea and improving everything about the business, drop by drop, as we say.
Drop by drop. Yeah, no, great. I mean, at the beginning, Martin, because I remember you mentioned the branding class. I remember some of the projects you have done, the interviews with peers, the negative feedback you also got, right? Which you still get, and we will talk about this later. You'll also like to talk about failure, which is good, I would say. Did you was there this moment where you said, hey, maybe I should forget about it, or were you always like, no, I need to make this work?
Well, I had a bit of time to discover, but I mean, I think the ultimate reasons why not so many people start companies is because it makes absolutely no sense. It's extremely irrational. The odds of success are extremely low, and there just have to be so many things that have to work out to create a business out of a high level idea. And I spent a lot of time trying to build a supply chain during INSEAD. I had some early prototypes. They were really, really bad, but at least it was a prototype. I got a bit of angel investor money, but I didn't really have enough when I actually decided to quit, right? At some point when you start a business from scratch, you have to, as I say, burn your ships, and you say, okay, there's no way back. I'm actually going to do that. And I virtually, because I was just so convinced of the idea, I didn't care if it would take me 2 years or 10 years. I just knew it had to exist. So before, of course, there were many points, but at some point you just have to say, okay, you know, I'm a very rational person going through consulting and all that. And if you look at this business idea rationally, when I was in 2015, it made absolutely no sense to do it. But then on the emotional side, if you believe in yourself and you're successful in bringing on the right people that help you along the journey, it's the coolest thing ever. So before, of course, there were doubts. There was a lot of holes in the concept. There still are. But once you get going and you burn the ships, you're on the journey. But making that decision to actually walk the talk and quit and actually do it, that's the tipping point that separates so many businesses from existing or not existing.
Yeah, no, this is a good point. I mean, but on the other hand, it's always difficult, right? We see this in our entrepreneurship classes. Some founders stop too early. Some founders believe too long in the idea, which is only perceived as a good idea by themselves, but not by customers. But looks like you found the right timing here. I mean, initially, Martin, also, what were the most important challenges, right? I remember, again, branding was one of it, and that was also the initial idea for the case, how to build a brand with low budget. I mean, you said it earlier. So what were the initial problems? Like, okay, there's this idea, so how do I now bring it to life?
Well, the initial challenge is to bring your idea to paper and really think it through, like what is the product, what is the business model, what is the distribution strategy, etc., because the challenge is to convince other people to believe in you, right? If you have no money and no experience in the industry, you need to convince large companies to actually say, okay, I don't quite get it, but I'll support this guy in some way. So you have to have a high degree of confidence, but also logic in transmitting why this idea could work, right? Because in theory, the big advantage that we have is we're very small. Waterdrops are tiny. So it's super scalable, absolutely low transport weight, very high unit economics, very sustainable, minimal packaging, minimal CO2. So most of the companies got it, but the biggest challenge was to actually get some of them to believe in the business and invest. And remember, we had to build everything from scratch. So it's not only the recipes we had to develop from scratch, the compression technology, but then also the manufacturing capabilities. We literally had to build a production site from scratch. Now we own 2 of our own production sites. That was the largest challenge. And once I had the supply chain secured, the next challenge is team, because I know what I can do, but I also know what I cannot do. So the art is to complement your skills with somebody who starts as a co-founder and can do the stuff you can't, because you know it's a long journey and you can't go it by yourself. So I believe bringing in the right people early on and taking the decision about a potential co-founder is huge. And then we spent 2 years in R&D where we fought against the odds for 2 years. We heard at least 1,000 times this is not going to work, but we hung in there, like you said. And then once you launch, the big challenge is to actually be flexible enough to listen to the market, because it doesn't matter what we think about the product or we think about the brand or our investors think or whatever. The only thing that matters is what our customers think. And there the challenge is to be honest enough in your decision to be wrong. And we were wrong many times, because we thought on paper we had genius strategies, but then the market hit us and we had to change everything all the time. And then over the course of the years, of course, the challenges just grow and grow and grow. And the bigger the organization gets, the more complex it gets and all that. But I think the first challenge is, and again, that's the reason why so few companies actually exist, is to start, because rationally it makes no sense. Once you start, you have to articulate why this idea is better than anything else, why you believe in the market, and have confidence in how you're going to sell it actually. And then it's always about building the right team and listening to the market and adapting, because even today, 5 years in the market, we're still young. Everything is work in progress and we're improving everything all the time. So if you don't have that mindset from day one, and that's, I think in our case, the good news that we had that mindset from day one, it's very challenging. But there's just so many other challenges, but off the top of my head, those are the few ones that stand out for me.
Initially, yeah, and by the way, that's one of the comments I'm always getting from incumbents, from corporates, right? How can we act like a startup? How can we develop a mindset like this? So would you say if you wouldn't hire the right people at the beginning, you wouldn't be sitting here? Because it's an interesting comment you just made, right? Because we see other founders that do not want to give away shares, and they want to keep as much as possible for themselves. But you decided right at the beginning, I cannot do it myself. So that was one important move.
I think generally there's no right or wrong in anything. I think you have to be very confident, of course, as a founder. You have to be the most confident guy because you're the only one who ultimately really, really, truly adhere and believes in the idea. But you have to be honest at the same time. You have to be naive, right? Because otherwise you wouldn't start the business, but you have to be self-reflected about your strengths and weaknesses. And in my case, we spent 2 years of technical R&D. I'm very, very bad at that kind of stuff. We had a lot of issues around brand building, design, packaging, legal, that there's so many complexities of business. And my ambition was always to bring in the smartest and most driven guys to help complement the things I'm not so good at. But then again, it depends on your own ambition. It depends on the business setting. But I would always recommend going the journey with co-founders and not all by yourself.
Yeah, I see the first questions coming in, which I will address here in a second. So please keep the questions coming. Maybe just one more question from my end, Martin. So you made it over this difficult time where most of the startups again disappear, right? So the first year, if you will. How did this change, and how did the priorities change after you said, okay, looks like it's working, right? You talked about supply chain, but how did the priorities change for you, and the strategy maybe even as well?
So, I mean, everything changes all the time. That's maybe the short answer. But to be precise, we spent a long time in R&D, and then we actually had a product. The first time we had a physical product we could actually give to a customer. I remember we were so proud, but it was really, really bad, the product. But at that point, we didn't really care because we were just happy that it worked, like the technology behind it worked. Then we were able to, of course, get some money from investors because then we could give that to people for the first time. So that was a big priority, get the product done and then get the product launched. That I think is a huge milestone. And then I think for the first, I would say 2 years, we spent a lot of time listening to customers, learning. We opened pop-up stores and worked face-to-face with customers all day. And we learned a lot. We literally changed everything. And many of our ideas were wrong. Like, for instance, we wanted to sell through companies at the beginning. That was our business plan, to B2B and sell to hotels and companies and use them as a multiplier. And then afterwards to D2C online. But we realized we would have died very quickly because it's far too slow and companies are too stingy and there was no traction. So we had to pivot after 3 months already. So the first 2 years are really you're in extreme agile MVP mode the whole time. Then once you reach product market fit, that took around 2 years probably. It's about getting the brand right, I would say. Like initially we wanted to go after hydration and say drink more water, because I love the idea of saying drink more water and not necessarily just saying drink my product because of ABC. All the bottled guys have to say drink my stuff because of ABC and invent things. We just say, no, drink more water. It's the best thing there is. But there's many reasons why people don't. So we allow them to make their own beverages at point of consumption. And there's many different preferences, many different flavors, many different functionalities. And the issue we had at the beginning is we couldn't say drink more water because the product wasn't nice enough. The product really didn't taste good. It had issues. So we had to be more functional at the beginning to counteract that in some way. But then after 2 years, the challenge was really, the priority was getting the brand right. How are you an emotional brand? And how do you transmit your USP? That is very vague, right? When drinking more water, everybody told us it's super high level. But I always believed in building something global and building something big, right? And if you think how high level Just Do It is, or some of these other great brands out there, we wanted to have an umbrella that is broad enough and emotional enough to really build a brand. And then you have to figure out how to spend marketing money intelligently, right? In marketing, it's very easy to spend a lot of money, very hard to get good impact with little money. And we didn't have a lot of money for a long time. We didn't earn salaries for a very long time. We had no money. We had minimal funding. We never took on venture capital funding, only had angels and family offices. So that was the challenge there, how to build an effective marketing organization. And then as you grow the team, the biggest challenges or priorities are always about how to build the organization. Once you have product market fit, you have the investors, you have your brand, it's about scaling. And I always say it's very easy to scale marketing, right? It's a function of money. It's very easy to scale in production capability. You just build more. It's very, very hard to scale an organization, to keep agile, to be focused, to do a lot at the same time, to have some processes, but not too many, to keep that entrepreneurship and that drive alive. So that's somehow how the evolution goes. And we're still in the midst of it, right? We're still pretty young. We're in a way global already, but it still feels like we're in the middle of the storm in many ways.
Yeah, I mean, this is a great point, Martin, because here I can catch the question here from Daniel, who was asking, how did you do marketing in the first place, right? As you said, I mean, later, if you have money, it's easy. But I remember initially, hey, how do you, I mean, you said you were listening to customers, collecting data, but with limited resources. So how did you get this started with limited resources?
Back then there was this buzzword called growth hacking, but what it essentially means is to get as much impact with as little money as possible. One of the most effective things we did, and we actually still do in many ways, is collect email addresses. I can remember we had this viral game where we said, we did a landing page and then we said, Waterdrop is coming, sign up here and you'll get a free gift, and share this link with 3 friends and you'll get a bigger gift. And that virtually cost us maybe 200-300 euros in product. And we got like 20 or 30,000 email addresses, which of course we then segmented and sent the right emails to the right person and generated revenue. So that was really, really cool. Other effective marketing tool are actually pop-up stores. You can create brand awareness or brand trust that people want online. If you're new online, people are always doubting you because you don't know, can you trust this brand or not? If they see you have a physical presence, consumers, it increases conversion rates and it gives you the access to customers you need to improve the product. So I would say the pop-up stores. A third one that most large companies don't understand, and I'm happy that they don't understand it, is that investing in your community with community managers is probably one of the best return on investments you can do. So for instance, we have a team that does nothing but keep customers happy. And that doesn't mean solving customer problems. That's our customer success team, but it's about engaging on social media, knowing when the top customers' birthdays are, calling them and answering all the social media comments, as stupid as they may be. And just being happy and loving our customers. And that creates authentic brand connections that gives you a lot of data because you understand what works, what doesn't. And it technically increases lifetime value. So those are things that were very obvious. And then we had a lot of other creative ideas, like launching limited editions, for instance, works very, very well. You create scarcity, you work with a local artist, you do something cool that gets a bit of press, and you don't really need a lot of money to launch it. You just launch it and it goes viral in a way, right? But you have to have a mindset that you have to focus on probably 5 or 6 of these measures to have 1 or 2 that actually work. So you have to acknowledge that you will fail very often because things either go viral or they don't. And if they don't go viral, it's bad, but anyway, it's not so bad because then nobody saw it. So that's some of the things we did.
Yeah, it sounds like now at Waterdrop you have a data strategy, right? So as you talked a lot about data, how to use it, how to leverage it, which again, I realize in my research, in particular, many corporates really struggle with this, right? Oh yeah, let me collect the data. At one point I will use it, but then they will never use it. But it sounds like you have some, while you're agile, you know what you want to use it for. Yeah. I mean, maybe what you just touched on, the question here from Eduardo, right? You touched on, hey, the big corporates are not able to do it. But he was asking the question, first of all, can you make a long-term sustainable business also because of these big mega corporations, which maybe could easily copy you, kick you out, or maybe not? What's your perspective on this?
I'm reading the question. Do you think you can build a long-term sustainable business? Is even possible in the current market? So the short answer is absolutely. And some of the regions are already profitable. I mean, the big advantage we have is that we're direct to consumer and we know exactly what works and what's not. And that gives us the ability to scale very, very quickly and acquire a lot of customers with very efficient marketing, because I agree. I'm not sure if that person has a background. E-commerce has changed a lot over the last 1.5 years, and more focused D2C brands have a very hard time getting reasonable acquisition costs because the tracking mechanisms don't work so well anymore. So if you're not mass market, you have a very hard time. And because we're in hydration, we're in mass market, we have customers that are technically 3 years old up to 110 years old. So we can target on with a very broad brush. If you're in a business where you're going after a specific segment, D2C, like many brands are, right? If you're selling vegan dog food, you have to micro target. It's very, very hard. And that's one. So we have extremely favorable D2C market out there. The second one is multi-channel. 70 to 80% of the business is still direct to consumer direct. So it's no platforms, just direct. So we own all the data, the experience, but we also have 25 own stores, and we have quite a big wholesale business that we're growing. And the future I think, for all the big D2C brands is to be multi-channel. And that person or Eduardo, I think, is right in many ways, that depending on how you allocate your marketing cost, offline is actually more profitable than online, but it depends how you do it. Conventional large companies, they just do big marketing budgets and then they allocate it. All our marketing spend is allocated onto online. That's why it seems a bit unprofitable, but it has the big advantage that it drives velocity in wholesale, where you have very minimal logistic costs. You just deliver once, very easy. D2C, you have to deliver to every person, and you don't have any dedicated offline marketing. So the second part is absolutely, but you have to have a significant share of offline business. And to have a successful offline business, you have to have the brand awareness and the customer base. So that's the chicken egg. You build the customer base online, you know exactly who your customers are, and the bleed of your marketing spend goes into driving your offline business. So absolutely. And the good news for us is nobody can really prevent us. If you're direct to consumer, you can't prevent us from growing. If you're fighting for shelf space because you're the 27th yogurt or the 18th flavored water, you're going to have a hard time because the big guys are going to notice and they're just going to get rid of you. You can't really do that in our case because we're a new category. We need very, very little space for high retail turnover. And we can choose where to sell and where not to sell, because we're coming from a position of being online and then going offline, rather than being extremely thankful to get the opportunity to be on a shelf. So we're quite confident about the business. Of course, there's a lot of things we have to fix along the way. There's a lot of complexities, but the short answer again is absolutely yes.
That also means what you just said, going forward, you're growing the offline business.
I think
percentage,
there's stages, right? You can go to 100 million predominantly online, but going from like 100 million to like 200-300 million, it gets hard even online, because you're not reaching everybody all the time. So the bigger you get, the more diversified your offline channels needs to be. And maybe perhaps one more thing, because it's about data, that's very powerful for us, because we have so much data and so much email addresses. We actually have an app that we launched where we can track customer behavior much more. And what we do as a brand is, just like an airline or hotel, we're not the first, but we give points to customers. When you purchase something, you get points, and then you can redeem points. And because we have quite a broad product portfolio, we can offer a lot of cool ways for customers to redeem their points, which of course gives them an added benefit, and it's a loyalty tool, but it also gives us a lot of information about which customers like what. So then again, we can segment much more intelligently, and again, send the right email to the right person or send the right pop-up message to the right person. So we know exactly what kind of customer is using what and why they're using it. And then of course, we do a lot of polls all the time, like just Joerg just did, a bit more sophisticated, but still, where we ask customers about their preferences, what they like, what they don't like in each market. And then we can see based on data what customers like, what not. We get a very good feel for our market. And then it also is a good indicator of what products, for instance, we sell wholesale. Like let's say we have 20 products online, you can be more long tail. If you go into wholesale, you want to have the top 4 or 5 selling products per market, and they're also different. So we know exactly, now being in 12 markets in Europe and also in the US, what sells where. And then we just make sure the best selling products land on the shelf, where we cannot necessarily influence the customer experience as much as we can in our own stores, obviously, and online.
leveraging the different channels as insights. Yeah, great. I mean, maybe just going before we dive into the tech-driven hydration ecosystem. Maybe quickly the question Paolo Eduardo touched on this earlier as well. So, do you fear the big companies? Do you fear the big companies copying you? Maybe not, yeah, kicking you out? I mean, not really. It sounds like.
No. I mean, it's a challenging time for the big guys because the bad news is that the sugar water industry is going down and bottled water industry is going up. But at the same time, customers are realizing that it doesn't make sense to bottle water in a country and put it on a truck and drive it to another country. So it's extremely unsustainable. But if you're not inherently digital, if you're not inherently e-com, it's very hard to just open up a digital business as like a side gig. I would say digital e-com for us is like the heart of the business, and everything else is complementary to that. So it's point one, is very hard to emulate the business model, the mindset, and the culture. And then secondly, of course, the supply chain is actually pretty complicated. I mean, we spent big money and years in developing the production. We have a big manufacturing plant and all that. And it's not like you can just copy it very easily. It would still take years and huge investments. And then, of course, in many ways, it would be actually nice for us to have a competitor because we often have to do a lot of explaining on the market. If we would have 2 or 3 other guys out there, it would actually help us because they can share the cost of explaining why that concept is superior and grow even faster. So I wouldn't even mind. The market is so enormous. We're speaking about, again, 600-700 billion. There could be 10 Waterdrops out there and we would still be small. So not really scared at all.
Yeah, great. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the latest move, moving away from the product itself, which I would argue is already a business model innovation. But now you added to this, the tech-driven hydration ecosystem, building the app, building a smart cap. Maybe also here, I mean, how did you come up with the idea? Because also here I talk a lot to organizations. They are having this mindset, executives, corporates, right? This is our product, this is what we sell. And I would argue this hydration ecosystem, which I was showing earlier, is a really nice move of another business model innovation. And maybe you can talk a little bit about even the numbers. I don't know, do some customers say, yeah, it's sexy, but what do I need it for, right? Or is it really gaining traction in the market?
You mean the Lucy world, right?
Yes.
So I mean, the first step is it all started with data, customer insights, because we ask customers, how do you consume the product? How much water do you drink? You know, and ask them to give a self-assessment. And one insight was that most people can't even tell how much water they drink. They drastically overestimate how much, and you can track that. So we were always thinking about, okay, if our customers don't really know how much water they're drinking, how can we help them? That's one. And then the other is we ask people why they don't drink tap water. And then you discover that some people are a bit concerned about the quality, about the taste, about, you know, potential bacteria that varies across countries. And then we said, okay, if we have so many insights around customers, and if we want to make customers more loyal to the brand, why can't we create a device that solves that? And that concept kind of was in the back of our heads for 1 or 2 years. And then we actually saw another company trying to do something the way we wanted to do it. So they had invented a smart cap, which is like a thing you put in a bottle that had an integrated UVC sensor. So it's a bit like sunlight. You can kill germs and bacteria, but it was made by technicians. So it was very large. It was very nice. It was overpriced. But we liked it a lot. And then we met with the guys and we decided just to practically buy the company. And change everything. So we used the technology, but then we added a sensor that could automatically track how much water customers consumed. And what we did is, and I can briefly show you, this is, it's called the Lucy cap. Lucy, because we didn't want to stretch the brand Waterdrop too broadly. We created like a sub brand. So Lucy is like our intelligent, let's just call it drinking assistant, made in Austria, which is really cool, because it's very easy to control your supply chain when it's in your background. And you put this on a bottle and it automatically tracks how much water is in the bottle and sends that data to our app. So you don't have to track in your app how much water you consume. The app will tell you, and it's very honest. And then people are like, oh my God, I really only drank that amount. Plus, if you want, you can press a button and it kills all germs and bacteria in your water. And it also reminds you to drink because we have your profile. We know how much water you should be drinking. And then when the time comes to actually take another sip, it will remind you, right? It will annoy you by blinking or making a noise, and so that it triggers customer behavior. And we launched it like we always launched it. We designed it and we made it for a year, but then we ran a very short pilot. We gave it to 20 people, then we gave it to 50 people, then we gave it to 100 people, did a lot of service, changed a lot of stuff again. Then we pre-launched it. We sold like 2,000 units and then stopped the launch. Then we tracked for now 4 months how customers actually use it, but you can see it with data, how many are active, how many are not active, why are they not active, so you ask them. And we're soon going to relaunch the device. So our idea is tying into the vision, what we want to do at Waterdrop. We want to provide clean drinking water around the world. We think it doesn't make any sense to bottle beverages. And if people are concerned about tap water quality, we want to be part of that solution because we can give them a holistic customer experience. And so we listened to customers, we developed the product, we launched it lean, we iterated, and then let's see how commercially successful it is. We personally don't think it's a product that we're going to sell millions of units out. We're not expecting it to be like the headphones of Apple, of course, but we're expecting to learn a lot about our customers, to be even closer to customers, and to use that data to make even better products, or learn other things, plus use the brand Lucy, that for me is an interesting aspect, to expand that brand again, to be associated more with water cleaning, right? So you have a dual brand strategy, which of course is an interesting stretch as well. Yeah, and that's how we're thinking about it at the moment.
Yeah, no, a nice way, a nice example of agile thinking when it comes to innovation. But also, as you said, I mean, it's for you about collecting data, but I assume otherwise you wouldn't have launched it if it wouldn't create customer value, right? I mean, you said it initially at Waterdrop, at the end, the customer is in the center of your strategy. So I'm pretty sure you have data on that as well. And who do you go after? Who is the target here for this? I see, Eduardo, you're interested, right? Great product. The price, Martin, I don't know. What are you charging for this?
The Lucy Cap, and the Lucy Cap will be 99 euros.
99, yeah. Before we dive more into the questions here, let me touch on the last topic, which is also a question here in the chat by Anonymous about enablement, right? About having the right mindset, the right way of working, flexible working hours, unlimited vacation days, right? I mean, working from home. So yeah, how do you, I mean, maybe back here, Martin, how do you run the organization? I mean, how do you, you said it earlier, people are so important, having the right mindset is so important, the right culture. And I know from my research, building the right transformation culture is the #1 barrier when it comes to transformation besides the legacy business model. So how do you deal with that problem here, the question in the chat?
So I'm reading the question again, but okay. I think, like I said, I think earlier, it's probably the single biggest challenge you have. It's the hardest and most complex question of all. I can just give you my perspective. I think, first of all, it's a bit easier if you're a successful, fast-growing business in a consumer world led by founders, right? So there's a lot of passion, there's a lot of things that people are excited about per se, because you're part of a mission that people can understand and can sign off on, right? If you're a large company doing something that people are not so excited about, it's a bit harder. What we do specifically is we work with OKRs, like most young companies. We were very transparent about what we want to achieve in a year. We break that down into quarters, and then per team and product managers, we have very transparent objectives and key results. So we give a lot of transparency, we give a lot of ownership to the teams, and then we literally try to let go in a way, because I think Steve Jobs even said that you should bring on people that tell you what to do and not the other way around. So we try not to micromanage, but we try to empower. I think that alone is huge. And if you're transparent about what you achieved and what you don't achieve, people have a much deeper understanding of why things are done the way they are and why decisions are taken the way they are. The bigger you get, the more uncomfortable decisions you have to take that don't only make you popular in a business. So that's worked quite well for us. I think a big challenge we're fighting is this whole discussion around flexible, remote, and office policy. The problem we have is that I would say there's two worlds. There's complex work and there's complicated work. And complicated work can be done from anywhere because it's been done before, and you just have to get the smart people. If it's very clear what the task is, it doesn't really matter where people are, and it could be anywhere in the world. But if it's complex work, so if you have to create something new, if you have to really innovate, if you have to bring several teams together to solve a complex problem, that really only works in person. That's my personal opinion. So we have to constantly balance, where are you super flexible? Do you bring in, talent from all over the world? Does it matter if they're in Vienna or not, or does it not? If you bring in people that are not deeply integrated, they feel demotivated because they're not part of the solution. If you try managing remote company and you're looking at a screen all day, speaking to a lot of people, it's not effective either. So it's a big challenge. We try to make things as clear as possible and then let go, and then people can, or the teams can virtually decide what they want to do and what not. One important aspect for us is because we're such a small team, right? We're 120 people in Vienna. We went from like 10 to 120 within, I think, 1-2 years. So a lot of people never really met in person during COVID. So we had to make sure that people had the opportunity to meet. We invested into new headquarters. We do a lot of things there. And what we also do is we have a stock option program for most of the people who've been around for a long time and all the leadership functions. So we have around, I guess there's around 50 people in the company who hold options on the entire group. So everybody's not only emotionally aligned, but also has a real economic benefit in the future of the organization. Those are some of the tools that we use, but to be honest, it changes all the time. Like running a company with 20 people is very different than 50, is very different than 100, very different than 200. So the bigger you get, it just gets more complex. So that's at least what we're doing at the moment.
Yeah, very good point also on what you said earlier, empowering people, right? Number 5, I just looked it up here in my research, number 5 barrier for successful transformation, right? This micromanaging, not empowering people, big barrier in many corporates. Yeah, let's use the last 5 minutes here for going through the questions. There are a couple of questions here from Stefan and David, back to the product itself, back to the flavors. Martin, how do you decide on the flavors? I mean, you talked about A/B testing online can be done easily. Any other flavors coming up with famous celebrities, famous cooks, famous people?
That's a good question, because the big advantage we have if you're online D2C, you can test a lot of things, and if they fail, they fail. If they're successful, you launch them. You can't really do that if you're selling in a shelf. Your partners are going to get very annoyed if you change your portfolio all the time and if you sell them unsuccessful stuff. So we've launched a lot of limited editions. What we do is we create something we think is good, then we launch it as a limited edition. If it's successful, it returns as a permanent flavor. And if it flops, it was a limited edition. That's one way. The other is to co-create. We haven't done anything with cooks yet, but we've worked with celebrities. And we also have 2 other collaborations coming up. So you find a celebrity that fits the brand and you work out the flavor together. That, of course, helps, because then the celebrities are more excited about the product because they actually co-created it. They're not just selling a random product. And then what we try to do is look at data. Like we can see online in each market which product is sold how, and how the reorder rate, the cohorts we call them, per flavor is. And then you can check a customer who ordered this flavor is X percentage more likely to reorder than a customer that ordered the other flavor. So then it becomes a bit of data manufacturing. For instance, how do you put together flavor testing kits. If you give a customer 4 flavors, how do you maximize the probability from 15 flavors that one of the 4 they really like, which again increases the cohort because they're going to reorder. So we look at data, we see what works, what doesn't. The ones that don't work, we kill. We've only had to do that once. And from, I think, from 5 limited editions, 4 worked and 1 didn't work. And that's how we do it. And at the same time, we do a lot of groundwork in flavor, in R&D. We have a team of 10 people doing nothing but working on enhancing the current product even, and developing new ones, because as you saw on the slide, we're going to have a lot of new products coming out to ultimately give the individual functionality and flavor to each customer. And tastes are very different, and requirements for functionality also.
Yeah, no, great. I mean, again, the advantage of DTC and a lean supply chain, and how you leverage data. Maybe here, interesting question from Stefan. Aren't you a candidate for acquisition by Nestle? And if so, do you want to sell as well? Or, I mean, so what's your strategy long term?
The short answer is, of course, we're a candidate for all the big guys. Like I said, they have always struggles. Do we want to sell? No, that was never my interest. Yeah, I've always been driven by the passion for making this as big as possible. That's also how we chose our investors. So we're still in charge. Nobody can really influence us, what we do and what we don't do. And the ultimate goal is just to create the biggest possible version of Waterdrop that I can build. And once I reach a point where I say, okay, I can't go any further, I'll have to think about options. But I have energy and ideas for at least another 10 years. So
and that's maybe a good
about that.
Yeah, that's maybe a good point. And I see Christian here. And Christian, I have your question here from that you sent earlier, pre-webinar, maybe as a last question to end here. It's a very question that is in your head as well, Martin, because your product only works in areas where clean water is accessible, right? So what about all the regions where it is not? How do you deal with this as a company, Waterdrop, in the future?
It's a good question. I mean, there's 2 aspects to it. One aspect is I'm not the only one saying that it doesn't make sense to bottle stuff. So there's a massive water filtration industry that's developing. There's stationary water filtration. There's a lot of UVC technology. There's charcoal filtration. I think in 5 to 10 years, that's going to be enormous, the industry. So it will be very common to get filtered tap water in every office, in every restaurant, on the airport, etc. Those things are going to happen automatically. It's just a question of time, even in emerging markets. And the other aspect is we're going to be part of the solution. So like I said, we of course have 2 or 3 other products than the one I showed you under development, where we think we can offer a very convenient and cost-effective way to make tap water clean, so that everybody can have clean tap water. And then you have the platform water, and then you either just drink the platform water, which is fine, or you enrich or augment the water to add any kind of flavor and functionality. So that's what we mean about the ecosystem. The brand proposition is drink more water. I think it's logical to be part of that solution. So
great. Yeah, we start on time, we end on time. Harish, you have a question about whether we can invest in the company. I will let Martin discuss this offline with you. He will maybe reach out or not. I will be the bridge. Maria, we will answer your question. There are a few more questions which we maybe can address after this session. So, but again, thanks a lot, Martin, for joining us today. Fantastic journey you have been on, and we wish you all the best going forward. And thanks for all the great questions here from the participants today. And if there are any follow-up questions, please reach out to me, and I hope I can help. And if not, I will bring Martin in, knowing he has very busy days in front of him. Thanks a lot, Martin, and see you soon.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.